welcome tonight's speaker. And this is someone that I really am looking forward to hearing her story. So if you would all please help me welcome Pam.
Hi everyone, my name is Pam and I'm a recovered alcoholic. I just want to thank Becca and thank the group for allowing me to come here and share my experience, strength, and hope with y'all. Just a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in the state of New Jersey. Don't condemn me for it. I grew up with, both parents are still very much together. I have two older brothers. My father's a retired Navy SEAL now, but at the time he was very much military. So in our house, growing up, I was raised in a very strict household. What went on in our house stayed in our house. You didn't cry. If you cried, it was a sign of weakness. You got made fun of, I got names called like Sour Bernhardt and, just you don't cry, I went to Catholic school. So, I had a very great belief in God, as a child. I had, my grandmother also lived in the house with us. So she was very, like a religious person, very much believed in God. I think from the time I was born to the time she passed away, she said novenas over me. I guess she just knew. I'm not real sure. But, so like growing up, I went to a Catholic high school, a Catholic school from up to 8th grade. And then my parents decided to put me in a public high school thinking, that was best for me. So like my freshman year, I did okay. My sophomore year is when my life began with alcohol. I decided to run away from home when I was 13 years old. And I ran away to a town called Paterson, New Jersey. It's not like the best little town for a person like me to be in, but for some reason, that's where I went. And I always hung out with like the older crowd, so I was hanging out with the older crowd that night, and somebody handed me a bottle of Southern Comfort. Didn't like the way it tastes, but I sure liked the way it made me feel. I downed that bottle, thinking I was cool. And with that, I'm a blackout drinker, and I blacked out. I woke up in a limousine. I don't remember how I got there. Got sick all over the limousine. Got kicked out of the limousine, and wound up in a runaway home down in Paterson. With that, the police got called, and that was my beginning of alcohol with the police department. So I got home, and of course, my parents like freaked out and yelled and screamed at me. My grandma was just like, "I'm just going to pray for you." And I'm like, "Okay, Grandma." But I got that taste in my mouth, I became like that weekend warrior. I would just like drink on the weekends. I was very active in sports during, in high school. I played softball. I used to fence. And I really liked it, so I'd be what was called like a part-time head and a part-time jock. So, anyway, with that, I was able to control my alcohol at that point, it hadn't gotten the best of me. I was dating this guy at the time, and we decided to get drunk one day. And he thought it would be a good idea to go steal my mom's car. So, we get drunk, and, I pass out, and I wake up coming through the windshield of my mother's car. He had hit a parked pickup truck, and I come through out of a blackout coming through the windshield. And, we're running like crazy, and it was like the SWAT team. We wound up somehow in Pennsylvania. So I had gotten extradited. The cops came, and I was like, I give up, because here I think it's raining. And it's not raining. I just happened to go like this, and it was blood coming from my face. And I was like, okay, I quit. You can catch me now. And so I got extradited from the state of Pennsylvania to the state of New Jersey. I wound up in Newark Airport, and I come through handcuffed and shackled. And here I thought I had arrived. This was cool. Because now I have this reputation in high school. Now I got a kid. How many people do you know that get handcuffed and all that kind of stuff? But with that, they gave me home detention, which it's before the ankle bracelets came out. But of course, the police already knew who I was and stuff. But I lived on a horse farm, so I had some acreage to live, to party on. I had 2 log cabins, so I would just go up in the woods, and everybody would just come over and party at my house. It's still, alcohol wasn't my master, but it was starting to take a toll. There's a lot of dry goods in my story, but being this is AA, I'll strictly just keep it to the alcohol. But with that, being on home detention, as soon as I got off of home detention, it was right back to, I was back out there drinking. But on the last, the day of my freedom of home detention, I was walking down the road. I was going to a party. A friend of mine and I were off to this party. It's true, you really shouldn't talk to strangers, because at that point a car pulls over and I meet my first husband. And so anyway, we go to this party, and I stayed out all night long, and I get home in the morning, and my dad is just enraged, and he's yelling and screaming at me, and the guy, my first husband, just says, don't talk to her like that. So I was instantly in love with this man, because he could stand up to my dad, hello, I'm in love. So at 17, I get pregnant. I walk into my parents and I'm telling them I'm pregnant, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. That's how much of a good kid I was, But at any rate, I was able to stop drinking and stop using stuff. And but that whole 9 months I was pregnant, that's all I thought about. I got a lot of catching up to do. So the day that my daughter was born, I counted her fingers, I counted her toes, and looked at her beautiful blue eyes. I said, woo! I got 9 months to make up for, and that's exactly what I did. As soon as I got home from the hospital, I'm like, I'm not breastfeeding. Give me the shot. I'm done. And I picked up drinking again. My alcohol was starting to pick up just a little bit. I also have 2 other children, and I had a miscarriage between my oldest one. Not a miscarriage. I was pregnant in the tubes, so they had to take it. And I honestly didn't remember that until I was actually doing a 5th step with a sponsee, and then it came back to me. But I have 2 other children, and with each of them, still, for some reason, I was able to stop drinking. I don't know why, but it was God's grace. I really assume that. But I would get in a lot of trouble when I was drinking with the law, and I would move geographically, thinking that would solve the problem. Never once did I think it was alcohol was my problem. It was just the people I was hanging around. The cops were picking on me. How dare they? I think in the state of New Jersey, I think in a 4-month radius, I went through 38 cars, and it wasn't because I was totaling them. It was so the cops would get off my back. My first husband and I were considered the Bonnie and Clyde of New Jersey. I'm not proud of that fact. This is where alcohol was bringing me. It taught me how to be a good thief, a good liar. And then there's the whole anger issues, with me. It speaks about in our big book about the Jekyll and Hyde. Once you put alcohol in me, you never knew who you were going to get. 1 minute I'm nice, the next minute I'm punching you in your face, or, I'm just enraged. And with that rage, my kids also got to see that too in me. And it's so true, you hurt the ones you love the most. Mm-hmm. And my kids are the ones that pay the most damage from me. I've moved geographically, thinking that's going to solve the problem. I've gone to counseling, but never was I once honest with them to say, oh yeah, I'm drinking. Oh yeah, I'm doing dry goods. Yeah, that's the problem. No, I lied every time, So I was labeled manic depressant, bipolar, and they want to, put me on medication. And of course I didn't take the medication, I took a lot of hostages along the way. You know, if people could get me what I want, then they were good for me. But as soon as they couldn't give me what I want, well, peace out, get out. You know, and then it was on to the next person, you know. And that's just how I lived my life. And I didn't really care too much who I hurt and what hostages I took along the way. I'm sorry. This is making me laugh. But with that, you know, with me moving back and forth, you know, there was never structure for my kids. So my oldest, my daughter, she decided to go live with her grandparents, which is my parents. And when she moved out, you know, I want to say it was like 6th grade, I'm not really sure. But when she moved out, I was like, good, one less mouth to feed. You know, who cares? You know, I didn't look at it as, you know, me being a bad mother or me not doing what I should have been doing. You know, I just didn't look at it that way at all. With her, you know, she grew up and she doesn't drink any type of alcohol. She's never been drunk. She's never tried any of the dry goods. I have a son who's 23 years old, and I'm not proud of this fact, but I taught him how to drink. I taught him how to use the dry goods, and he's still out there, and I pray for him. You know, that's all I can do. My youngest son is 16 years old. He plans on going into the military, and he wants nothing to do with alcohol or drugs or even smoking a cigarette. So, you know, I guess what do you say? 2 out of 3 isn't bad, you know. For me, liquor was quicker. I wasn't a beer drinker or wine. You know, I'd rather have liquor. To me, it just, you know, it got me to that effect where I want it to be. You know, it got me to that escape where I could feel numb. You know, my alcohol over the years had gotten more intense. But with when 9/11 happened, I have to back up. No, I don't. When 9/11 happened, it was in 2001, and everybody knows that day, and like it goes down in infamy. But for me, it kind of hit me kind of hard. I lost my Catholic school priest, and you know, that day just, even to this day, it still, you know, affects me in so many different ways. But you know, I couldn't understand why that whole day happened. But you know, how could they take somebody? I can say his name. His name was Father Michael Judge. He was the fire chaplain down in New York City. But he was also a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. He had over 20 years in. And they didn't know that until after I came into the program. But, you know, I can remember going into confession and all, and just, you know, just him being a really good man and never judging me and never condemning me and, you know, never making me say all the, you know, the Our Fathers and the Hail Marys and all that. You know, he just kind of just like, you know, patted me on the head and gave me a hug and said, you know, everything's going to be all right, kid, and just like kind of sent me on my way. You know, but that's where my alcohol really started to spiral downward for me. You know, with that, I had been in another relationship, and he had gotten arrested the next day on September 12th, and he was going to do some good time in prison, and so it was just me home. So now, you know, I'm a deranged idiot. You know, I don't know how to deal with life. My depression's kicking in. I'm still working, you know. I got a job working as a custodian in a school. And any job that I've ever worked at, I've never been fired because of alcohol. I've sought out jobs where I was able to drink on the job with the bosses, you know, and hang with the big dogs, as they say, you know. But being as a custodian, I worked in the night shift, so I had no supervisor. I had nobody babysitting me. So I was just able to just do my thing, you know. I would do my run real quick, and then, you know, I'd have people do drop-offs for me, and I'd just party up on the roof. You know, I even like grew some herbage out there on school property, you know, and they didn't even realize it. But, with that, I was making pretty decent money. I was able to support my family. And at this time, I was still a functioning alcoholic, I was still doing what I needed to do. But with that, one day I had gotten hurt and I broke my back. So now I'm out on workman's comp, and they gave me a bunch of medication. And it's true, and that's also true what they say, alcohol intensifies the effect. Alcohol and my prescription medications done kicked my butt. And I kind of, it really took me out of that feeling, that numbness, By now, alcohol had become my master. I couldn't go anywhere or do anything unless alcohol was involved. By this time, the whole soccer mom thing, half the time I wasn't taking my son to the soccer field or, do that parent-teacher conferences. I think my kids lived on like cereal for a long time, if I cooked, but there was food in the house, By now, my oldest daughter is away, and she'd been in college, and she had met her husband. Oh, they're still married, and I have 2 beautiful grandchildren. But, when I met my son-in-law, I didn't think much of him. I really didn't. She had asked me to go out to Missouri. I call it misery. The only thing in Missouri out there was to do was watch the cars rust and go to Walmart for excitement. And I was like, yeehaw, this is a fun town, But, we flew down there and I didn't realize it's a 5-hour drive. And, I'm just drinking away on the plane. And, so many times I've realized once I've gotten sober how many times that God's looked out for me and I just never knew it. I just had no clue, because by now I'm very upset with God. I got resentments towards God, with 9/11, with people that I loved that had been taken away, like such as my grandmother. She had died of pancreatic cancer, and it was like she was in a lot of pain, and, just didn't understand, why, that whole question, why. But with that, I go down to Missouri. And here I see, my daughter's 3 months pregnant. And this is the first time I'm really meeting my son-in-law. My daughter's 3 months pregnant. She's about as white as my shirt. She had lost 30 pounds in the first 3 months of her pregnancy. And I walked into the house, and the house was it was a mess. It was just a mess. I walked into the kitchen. I looked in the refrigerator, and when I opened up the refrigerator door, it was like a smell coming after me. And it was like there was some chicken that was down in the bottom of the bin that had maggots in it. I went to get some orange juice, and the orange juice was just like, I don't know, it was just curdled. And everything that my son-in-law had said to me in my mind was a lie. And I'm really not proud of this fact. But I proceeded to beat the living crap out of my son-in-law. And with that, my kids left. They just ran out of the house. They weren't going to sit there and say, "Stop, Mommy, stop," because they're used to Mom going off like this, or they just wasn't getting involved with it. And when it was all said, I had this poor boy down on the ground, and he was turning blue. And I'm really not proud of this fact, but it is part of my story. I really did try to kill my son-in-law. And it was really by God's grace that I didn't kill him. His lips were turning blue, and some made me stop. And I did stop. And I got him up, and, I figured I'm the good alcoholic mommy. I can fix this. I proceeded to tell my son-in-law that my daughter was coming home to live with me because I could better take care of her. I proceeded to take my kids to Walmart and to take them out to dinner, but, go to Walmart and buy them all kinds of stuff because, that's how I can fix things. Just buy them off. And they said, and that's what I did. And my son-in-law wasn't going to argue with me because after what I just did to him, I don't think I would have argued with me. I really don't. But with that, I got my daughter home with me and, I'm out on workman's comp and I'm just thinking oh God, how am I going to support my daughter who's pregnant, my 2 boys, and do what I'm doing? You know, and I didn't realize it again, but what it was is my daughter became the mom. I became the child. And she was the one that took care of the house while I drank and, you know, I did what I was doing. By this time, you know, alcohol, I was in its grips. You know, it had me. I didn't care about anything. I did allow my son-in-law to come live with me. That took some doing. But anyway, I did allow him to come live with me. And when I did that, I would have friends come over and I'd be like, watch this. I'd walk into the room and he would walk out of the room. And I would laugh. I'm like, this boy's afraid of me. Isn't this funny? And I'd go into the next room where he was. And he would walk out of that room. You know, and I just thought it was funny that a boy, you know, a guy was afraid of me, you know. It wasn't that he was afraid of me. He just didn't want to be abused by me. And that was the bottom line of it, you know. You know, and I often wondered why he never hit me back that day. It was because he's a real man. And he was taught never to hit a woman. You know, I have the utmost respect for my son-in-law today. You know, he's done in February, no, scratch that. Matter of fact, January 8th, he goes back for another tour in Iraq. Or not Iraq, Afghanistan. And he takes really good care of my daughter and my grandchildren. Very good care of them. And I really have a really great relationship with him today, and it's only because of this program. But with that, my granddaughter was born October 14th, 2005, and the day that she was born, I was at the hospital that day. I don't remember much of it, you know. I know I was drunk. I know I was pretty wasted. And I can remember the nurses asking me, you know, do you want to hold your granddaughter? And I said no. And the nurses started talking crap and saying, you know, well, what kind of grandmother is she? She doesn't even want to hold her granddaughter. You know, and here I go. I instantly want to fight again, you know. And God stepped in again because I didn't fight anybody. What I did do is I walked out of that hospital and I called my friends and I said, hey, I'm a grandma. I'm having this party. You want to come over? You know, and I was pretty known for my parties up north. If I said I was having a party, you know, they lasted for more than a day. They normally lasted like weeks at a time. And with that, you know, I had about 30 people in my house. So most normal people, when their grandchild or baby's in the house, it's like, shh, be quiet. You know, there's a baby in the house. You know, not me. Here I got this party going on. And I can see the disgust in my kids' eyes, you know, my daughter's eyes and my son-in-law's eyes. And, you know, I just kind of looked at him like, if you don't like it, get out. This is my house. You know, and that's the kind of attitude I had. You know, real selfish. And, you know, with that, this party went on for a week straight. My youngest son was like, you know, Mom, I really want to go to Grandma's house. And Grandma lived like a mile down the road. So I took my son down to his grandmother's house. She lives on a farm. And I happened to see somebody that I hadn't seen in a long time. But there was something different about him. You know, he had that look on his face, you know. He had that gleam in his eyes. And, you know, and I'm like, hey, you know, I'm a grandma. Why don't you come over to my house? I'm having a party going on and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, you know, I don't drink anymore. I'm like, what do you mean you don't drink anymore? He's like, you know, he started mentioning me like people, places, and things. And I'm like, what in the world? You know, he goes, hadn't you realized you hadn't seen me in 10 years? I'm like, no, not really. I had no idea. You know, because it's so true. You know, people come in, when you're drinking, people come in and out of your lives. You don't realize who comes, who goes. I mean, at least this alcoholic, I had no idea. You know, and then he started talking to me about Alcoholics Anonymous. And he started talking to me about his man toys. You know, he's got a brand new Dodge truck and quads and a boat. You know, and he lived up in Yankee Lake, which really nice fishing up there. And I'm starting to lose my buzz now, and I'm like, yeah, Alcoholics Anonymous, huh? Half the people, I knew that was an Alcoholics Anonymous. It's like at my house with this party still going on. So I said, well, thanks a lot, I gotta go, and, I get back to my house, and before I could even touch my doorknob, another friend rolls up, and she's like, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, I got a party going on in the house, why don't you come on in? She goes, why don't you take a ride with me? I'm like, where are you going? She goes, an AA meeting. I'm like, ooh. So I'm like, okay. Because other people had seen me that were in the program and tell me I look like crap or whatever, you need to stop drinking, and I would tell them, go shove it. And a lot of other kind words that I won't mention. And so anyway, when this friend, is asking me, so like my first thought was like, hey, is there any cute guys there? She's like, of course there is. I'm like, all right, let's go. So I go to the meeting, and no offense to anybody, but there was a bunch of old guys. I mean, really old guys. And I'm looking around, and I'm going to kill her. But for some reason, I stayed in that meeting, and there was a gentleman telling his story just like I was telling you mine. And, I started to kind of identify. But then I kind of had a problem, like, I'm not an alcoholic. A drug addict, yeah, I can say I am. But an alcoholic, I had that thought of an alcoholic being that Bowery bum, the guy brown bagging it and, urinating on himself, I still have my kids, I still have the house, I still have the cars. I didn't lose anything, but I did lose. I lost me. I had lost myself. And so after the meeting was over, she had asked me, hey, you want to go to the bar? And I'm like, huh? I'm like, aren't you one of these AA people? And she's like, psh, I only have to get my paper signed twice a week for probation. And I'm like, oh. I'm like, I could have very well went to the bar, but like I said, I still got this party going on in my house. So anyway, for some reason I did, like nobody talked to me at that meeting. Not one, nobody. But for some reason, I grabbed a meeting list. And I don't even know why I did that. But for some reason, I did. So I got back to my house. And like I said, there's still this party going on. And I tried to start consuming everything I could. And the alcohol and every substance that I tried to put into my body that night stopped working for me. And I don't know if you all have ever seen Pink Floyd The Wall. Well, that's exactly what I did. I freaked out. I mean, I freaked. I took the chair and I threw it through the television set. And, those 30 people, you start throwing furniture around. Those 30 people were out of the house, like, immediately. And with that, my kids left. And my newborn granddaughter left. And the only person that was in that house was me. I went in the bathroom and I looked in the mirror and I had no idea who was staring back at me in that mirror. And I wanted to die. I wanted to commit suicide so bad. I just couldn't figure out how to make it look like an accident so my kids could benefit from it. Because at this point in time, I knew, my kids had no use for me. They could do much better without me. And, I walked into my bedroom, and as I mentioned earlier about my grandmother had a very deep belief in God, and there was a picture on my wall, and I just stared at that picture, and I said, God, please kill me. Just please take me. Either kill me or help me, because I can't go on living like this. I mean, I can't express, the hatred and the loathe that I felt that night. And, for some reason, I went to sleep. I got up the very next morning, and I instantly want to fight somebody because my house is trashed. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, whose butt can I beat? And then I'm like, oh yeah, I did it. So, I went to my kitchen table, and on the kitchen table, lo and behold, was that meeting list. So October 20th, 2005, I walked into the rooms of AA in a little town called Warwick, New York. And I got to the doorway, and I heard people laughing, and I saw them smiling. And I saw that gleam in their eyes again, you know. But I couldn't make it through the doorway. I swear I don't know who pushed me, but someone really pushed me through the doorway. And with that, you know, they welcomed me with open arms. You know, they told me I never had to feel like this ever again. And of course, I got an attitude problem, you know. And I got a chip on my shoulder, and it's a huge one. And I'm looking at them like, how do you people know what I'm feeling, you know? I'm just thinking that they're going to teach me how to drink and be happy again, you know. It's not at all what I learned in AA. The women went around, and on the back of the meeting list they wrote their names, and after the meeting that day they bombarded me, and I didn't know how to handle having women around me. You know, I grew up a tomboy. You want to talk to me about hunting, you want to talk to me about fishing, but talk to me about going to the mall or going shopping or going to get my hair did and my nails done. I didn't know anything about that. I didn't, you know. I didn't trust women. I figured y'all was just as shiesty as I was. So I just, you know, I didn't know how to identify with the women. But what I did, they told me to get a sponsor, to pick somebody that I wanted what they had. And there was a gentleman in the back of the room. And I don't know if it was because he said that he was a recovered alcoholic and he talked about the steps, or if it was the wave in his hair that reminded me of my grandmother's. But something made me go up to that man and ask him to be my sponsor. And I know that a lot of people are like men with men and women with women, you know. But for me, I would have never got sober if it wasn't for the men in this program. For me at first. So I went up and I asked him if, you know, if he would be my sponsor. And he had asked me, are you willing to go to any length for your sobriety? And I said, yeah. I mean, I hemmed and I hawed and I said a lot of things. But when it came down to it, you know, I asked him to be my sponsor, and I was willing to go to any length for my sobriety. You know, then he asked me if I could read. And I said, well, of course I can read. I went to school in New Jersey, not in New York. Wrong thing to say, you know, wrong thing. I didn't know. My sponsor does not know how to read or write. But he knows his book like the back of his hand, you know. He really does. He's amazing. And with that, he told me to grab this big book and open it up to page 112 and read the first 3 words. And the first 3 words on that page says, read this book. I said, oh man. So like I said, anytime that I hemmed and I hawed, he just asked me, are you willing to go to any length for your sobriety? And I said, yes. So I went home and I read the first 164 pages of our book. And I said, oh man, I'm an alcoholic. And I called him back and I'm like, I'm an alcoholic. And he's like, good for you. You know, are you ready to do the work? And I'm like, yes, I was, you know. I didn't slack on this program. I didn't slack through the steps. I went through these steps immediately, like it says to do in our literature. It was, you know, it's all about action and more action. You know, with me being powerless over alcohol, I mean, yeah, I knew that. You know, my life was unmanageable. You know, I was a train wreck. You know, I was like that tornado. You know, like it speaks about in our book. You know, the problem I had was the problem with God. But when my sponsor asked me, you know, do I believe in something much greater than myself? I said, absolutely. I'm just a little pissed off at him right now. He said, it's okay, we can work on that, you know. But when I did that 3rd step prayer and I got on my knees and I asked God, you know, I just knew. I don't know why, but I just knew everything was going to be all right. You know, and then I went on to that 4th step, and I didn't like what I saw in that 4th step, you know. But I had to do it, you know. And then trusting another human being, you know, that was a tough one for me because, you know, couldn't trust anybody. But for some reason, I trusted my sponsor enough to do this 5th step with him. And, you know, I also get asked, you know, how could you tell a man your 5th step? Well, how honest do you want to be? You know, how free do you want to be? I had nothing to hide. I just wanted to get out. I wanted that freedom. I wanted that peace and that serenity in my heart like he has. So with that, I did my 5th step, and I'm like, oh man, this stuff is going to hit the streets. And, you know, it never did. And I went home, and like it says in our big book, you know, reflect for 1 hour. And then after you reflect for 1 hour, if you didn't leave anything behind, go on to the 7th step. Well, the 7th step is a prayer. And I said that prayer, and when I said that prayer, I began to cry, And that amends, in my 8th step, that amends is really in your 4th step. You wrote that list. I just had to double my efforts a little bit. And like I said earlier, you hurt the ones you love the most, and the most damage I did was to my family, to my kids. And what's great about kids is they love you unconditionally, and my kids love me unconditionally. But with that, when I made my amends to them, they in turn told me about things I didn't remember. And that really hurt, because I honestly don't remember. And to this day, I don't remember. But I must have done it, But today I make that living amends to them on a daily basis for each day that I stay sober. With my parents, that amends didn't go so well. How many times did I say, Mom, Dad, I'm sorry. I won't do it again, I promise. And did it right back again. That's the insanity of this disease. So that one took a little bit of time, I was such a good alcoholic. My parents had moved and didn't tell me where they moved to. So, but today I do know where they live. I do have a great relationship with my parents. My parents, my dad actually tells me he loves me today and that he's proud of me, and that's a big thing for me. My mom loves me unconditionally, but, had to do that tough love, I guess, with me. I have some other amends out there that, financial amends that I'm still working on. I have some amends out there that, when God sees fit, He'll put them in my life, The whole thing about making amends is just to be willing, and that's, I remain willing to make those amends. Steps 10, 11, and 12, I call them my maintenance steps, but I also call them my growing steps. I learn from these steps. Today, when I'm wrong, I can promptly admit it. I'm not afraid to say I'm sorry when I screw up. I pray and I meditate. I pray throughout the day. I thank God all day long. There's so many gifts that I've gotten in this program. It's been amazing. In step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, I try to carry this message. I am a recovered alcoholic, and I say that I'm recovered not to cause controversy. I say it because the big book says so. And, I did what the first 100 did. And, I say it for the newcomers to give them hope that they never have to feel like this ever again. And to the old timers and to whoever's listening. Today my life has completely changed. I'm not that animal that I was when I came in here 7 years ago. Today I'm not selfish. I'm not that animal, I can look at people, I can hug people. I have men and women in this program that are really good friends of mine. That was a big step for me. I sponsor people today. I give back, In order to keep what I have to freely give it away. That's what I was taught. And I don't have a problem doing service. Today life is good. I've gone through a lot of things in AA, good, bad, or indifferent, and I never had to pick up a drink. The thought of a drink, I don't have it. That obsession's been lifted from me. I've gone out on 12-step work, and I've had to buy alcohol for folks to get them in that detox. If that obsession wasn't lifted, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I think the best thing that AA's given me is that I have a relationship with God. And the best thing that God has given me is AA. So that's really all I have. And I thank you all. And Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.